I recently stumbled across an article by Bleacher Report which talked about the 10 most disappointing college football coaching hires of the decade, and I want to take a look at it and share my thoughts. Today we'll go through the article and we will determine if the list is accurate and what I think of each of their selections. But first, if you love college football content, then this is definitely the channel for you. So be sure to subscribe if you are new, give the video a like if you want to support what I'm doing here on YouTube, suggest another topic I should do next, and turn on post notifications so you never miss when I upload. Now let's go ahead and get started. I will leave a link to the article down in the comment section, so be sure to let me know a coach that you think disappointed this decade and what you think of their top 10. Let's get into it. At number 10, they had Joe Moorhead. In case you did not know, Joe Moorhead became a big-time name when he was the offensive coordinator at Penn State, and when Dan Mullen bolted for Florida, Moorhead was named the head coach for Mississippi State, and you could say people expected a lot out of him. Maybe it was the high expectations Mullen left the program, but Joe did not live up to the hype. After a decent 8-5 season, Moorhead flopped to 6-7 in year 2. Even though that isn't awful for a 2-year run, the powers decided it was enough and they decided to can him. Players were suspended for academic fraud, they missed bowl practice, there was even a fight, and just a lot of people thought it was a lack of a good fit at Mississippi State, so he ended up getting fired. The culture didn't fit what they wanted, and he regressed, so he was fired, and Mike Leach was hired from Washington State, and he had a pretty up and down first year as well. Honestly, I don't think Joe should be on this list, because he was never seen as that great of a hire, and he made bowl games in his first 2 years at the helm, so he's definitely not one of the 10 worst. Moorhead is the offensive coordinator at Oregon, and I think there are many other coaches who deserve to be on this list, and personally, I would have Lovie Smith instead of Joe. At number 9, they had Dana Holgorsen to Houston as a bad hire. After seeing pretty good success as the head man at West Virginia, Dana was expected to return home to Houston and continue to build what many saw as one of the better Group of 5 schools. He had an elite quarterback in De'Aaron King, but his first year at the helm was a disaster, and then King would leave for Miami. He has gone 7-13 in 2 seasons and hasn't really even won a big game, but he does have an experienced quarterback in Clayton Tune coming back, and he needs to deliver or he will be fired after just 3 years. Honestly, I went back and forth on whether he deserves to be on this list, but I do think he should be. He left a Power 5 program to take a Group of 5 job, and he's been a complete bust to this point. At number 8, we have Charlie Strong to UCF. After a good stretch at Louisville, Strong became the head man at Texas before he got fired and went over to USF. He replaced Willie Taggart, who had left for Oregon, and he was expected to keep the Bulls program on the rise. He went 10-2 in his first year with guys like Quentin Flowers, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and Marlon Mack, and they were one crazy kickoff return away from beating an undefeated UCF team, but after his one good year, it fell apart. Strong went 7-6 the next year before spiraling to a 4-8 record in 2019, which was enough for South Florida to can him. He had former blue-chip quarterback Blake Barnett at quarterback, but things did not go according to plan, and he was fired, and they decided to hire Clemson assistant head coach Jeff Scott to be the new head man, and so far USF football has been on the downfall and kind of a mess. In terms of most disappointing coaches, I would have Charlie Strong in my top 10, but I think the Texas tenure was a lot worse than the USF one, so I do disagree with this take, as he arguably had more success in Tampa than he did in Austin. At number 7, they have former Arkansas and SMU head coach Chad Morris. After the Brett Bielema tenure did not work out, the Razorbacks chose to go in a new direction, and they hired former Clemson assistant turned SMU head coach Chad Morris. He was seen as a good recruiter who could turn around Arkansas football, but besides one good recruiting class, he was pretty terrible, and that's an understatement. He was fired after going 4-18 in less than 2 years, and he went 0-14 in the SEC. To make matters worse, he lost 45-19 against Western Kentucky, and fun fact, one of the quarterbacks that he had chased out of town actually went to Western Kentucky and would beat him, and would beat his own team. I remember watching those Arkansas teams, and they were probably the worst coached teams I have ever seen as a college football fan. I heavily disagree with Morris being at number 7, because in my opinion, he should be number 1 on every list ever made for poor coaching hires this decade. Their reasoning for not having him higher was because of the low expectations he had going into his tenure, but that's no excuse in my opinion, and he was honestly the worst hire of the decade, and no one even comes close. At number 6, they have Tom Herman and his time at Texas. In case you didn't know, Herman was a big-time name as Ohio State's offensive coordinator. He turned them into a Group of 5 power as they beat number 3 Oklahoma, number 3 Louisville, and Florida State, and he was seen as a generational coach at one point, and the hype for him was unreal. He took the Texas Longhorns job, and expectations were through the roof for him, and understandably. Tom Herman was not awful during his 4 years in Austin, as they went 32-18 at 22-14 in the Big 12, and they won all 4 bowl games and even got to the Big 12 championship, but that was not good enough, and after going 7-3 this year with a very experienced team, he was replaced by Alabama offensive coordinator Steve Sarkisian. I am torn on whether he should be on this list. In terms of disappointing, I guess you can say so, but in terms of the worst hires, he wasn't a bad hire at all in my opinion, and he at least did pretty solid. I would not have put him in my top 10, but I can see the argument they are making in this. At number 5, they had Chip Kelly at UCLA, and I 100% see this one. Chip Kelly made a name for himself at Oregon and took the Philadelphia Eagles job in the NFL, but after not seeing enough success, he went back to the Pac-12 and took the UCLA job to replace Jim Mora. Many thought he would have a rebuild year and then see success, and that his West Coast style offense would work, but it hasn't exactly done so well. He's gone 10-21 in 3 seasons so far, and they really haven't looked that good, especially for all the hype that he had going into it. He has Dorian Thompson-Robinson at quarterback for the 4th year. He landed Michigan running back transfer Zach Charbonnet and got a pretty good 2021 recruiting class. We need to see him have a big 2021 campaign, or he may not have a job next fall. I personally wouldn't have Chip top 5, but definitely on the list, as UCLA has kind of become forgotten, and they've missed the bowl game in all 3 years he's been there. At number 4, they had Nebraska's Scott Frost. After becoming an elite name at Oregon and UCF, Scott Frost was the perfect guy to replace Mike Riley in the mess he had made. He was a Husker back in the day and actually led them to an undefeated season, and the hype for him to come back to Lincoln was pretty much unreal, but he has done anything but live up to it so far. He lost to rival Colorado and Troy at home in his first 2 games, and it has just not been a good tenure for him so far. He's gone 12-20 in his first 3 years, with his best season being in 2019, where they would start the year ranked, and some even picked them to win the Big Ten West, but would finish at 5-7, and the season was culminated by way of a game-winning field goal for Iowa to beat them. He lost his star wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson to the transfer portal, and he will have a lot of work to do in 2021 if he wants to keep his job. Personally, I think he should be fired if he does not get to a bowl game in 2021, but if he at least shows some sort of progress, he might get 1 more year after that. At number 3, we have former Florida State head coach Willie Taggart. He first made a name for himself playing and coaching at Western Kentucky before he built USF football and was good enough to take the Oregon job. After having a decent season, he went back home to Florida and took the Florida State job after Jimbo Fisher left for Texas A&M. Sadly, it was a nightmare as Florida State went 5-7 in Taggart's first year at the helm, and he was 4-5 in their second year, including an almost embarrassing loss to UL Monroe, and the program decided to let him go. Attendance was down, fans didn't like him, and Florida State was looking for a quick fix to their problems, and he was not that. He probably was not the coach for the job, but I think he got screwed over to a degree, and at least should have gotten a full 2 or 3 years to do that. He has since left for Florida Atlantic, where he's looked solid. I do think he should be on the list, but not at number 3. Tennessee fans thought they hated Butch Jones, but little did they know that Jeremy Pruitt would bring it to a new level. He comes in at number 2 on this list, and he left a mess of a legacy for the program to clean up. After becoming a big-time name at Florida State, Georgia, and Alabama, Pruitt took the head coaching job at Tennessee. They showed flash in their first year with a road win over Auburn, but year 2 was supposed to be a lot better. Instead, they lost to Georgia State and BYU to start the year, but they would rebound and go on a winning streak and included a comeback win against Indiana in the Tax Slayer Bowl. They began ranked in 2020 and were supposed to fight for the SEC East, but after 2 close wins, the season basically fell apart. Star players left, and the NCAA came investigating, and they got caught, so they had no choice but to fire Pruitt, and Philip Fulmer stepped down. With some recruiting violations, the school could lose some scholarships, have a postseason ban, and Lord knows what else will happen to them, but there's a huge mess to clean up. I 100% agree with this take, and he truly was the second worst guy behind Chad Morris in my opinion. And best of luck to Josh Heupel. He's got a long rebuild and a lot of mess to clean up, and fans that probably won't give him the amount of time it will take. Finally, the article has Les Miles as the most disappointing hire on the list, and I totally disagree with this take. Les built his name at LSU and was a really good coach for a while, and he actually won a national championship, but he would eventually get fired and took some time off coaching. In 2019, he decided to take the Kansas job after David Beatty was fired, and he was expected to at least make Jayhawks football somewhat respectable. He won a conference game and almost beat Texas in his first year, and things looked like they were slowly on the uptick. His 2020 campaign would start out very tough though, as they lost to Coastal Carolina, who would end up being actually pretty good, and then he proceeded to lose every other game the rest of the season, and he gave up over 40 points to Baylor, who I think had the 3rd worst offense in college football last year. To make matters worse, allegations from his LSU time surfaced, and he was fired just a few weeks ago. Be sure to check out my documentary about that, and I'll leave that in the comments section. And yes, those allegations weren't the best, but to say he was the most disappointing hire of the 2010s decade is just pure clickbait in my opinion. He was building some momentum at Kansas, as his 2021 recruiting class was actually better than Matt Campbell's at Iowa State's, and it was 6th in the conference, and it was always going to be a long rebuild to make Kansas relevant. They have been the worst Power 5 program this decade, and to expect Les Miles to even make a bowl game in year 2 is just crazy. I would maybe have him near the bottom of the top 10, but anyone but Chad Morris at number 1 is just a complete joke in my opinion. I don't think Les was that bad of a coach. I don't think he was that bad of a coach to be called the worst one. But this is my opinion, and I want to know what you guys think. What do you think of my takes, and who do you think is the most disappointing coaching hire of this decade? And let me know if I should do more reaction videos like this. I really enjoyed this style, so be sure to give it a like if you want to support it, subscribe if you love college football content, suggest another topic or series I could try out next, and be sure to check out my video about coaches on the hot seat for the 2021 season. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.